So, as I said, I think the best way to start this section, it's a new section that we're doing in Isaiah, section 24 to 27, which pretty much everybody agrees that is written on these chapters, that they all go together, that it's a kind of a section set apart in the book of Isaiah, just like the Oracle of the Nations or to the Nations. The preceding section was all passages all grouped together about the same subject. This is also grouped together because of subject matter, and it's called by some people, they call it Isaiah's little apocalypse. It's not because it's about the end of the world. They say that but it is about that the judgments being spoken of are in a more cosmic um, way rather than just about individual nations. So, with that very brief introduction, I think what I'd like to do is have us read through chapters 24 through 27. And if you guys want to share with the reading, it's only 4 chapters. The longest one has 23 verses. So they're all pretty short. Does anybody want to take chapter 24?
I
Okay, then.
can.
Okay, Don's got 24. Who wants 25? That's the shortest one, I think.
I'll take 25.
Anybody want 26? I feel like I'm auctioning stuff off. 26? Alicia's got it.
Going once,
Uh,
going twice.
all right. I'll get the last one. Unless Becky was waiting for the last one. All right. Uh, couldn't hear you, Becky. You were on mute. We're going to have to learn sign language. There we go.
That's why you couldn't hear me.
Yeah, that's
I'll
right.
I'll do one. What's left?
Okay, you're probably then saying every time, I'll do it, I'll do it, I'll do it. It's like, I don't know. All right. You got the last one, 27. All
27.
right. All right. So yes, 27. So we'll just read straight through. So Don's got the first chapter. When he finishes, then I don't remember who said chapter mom as the next one. Then just continue on. Go ahead, Don.
All right. See, the Lord is going to lay waste the earth and devastate it. He will ruin its face and scatter its inhabitants. It will be the same for priest as for people, for the master as for his servant, for the mistress as for her servant, for seller as for buyer, for borrower as for lender, for debtor as for creditor. The earth will completely laid the earth will be completely laid waste and totally plundered. The Lord has spoken this word. The earth dries up and withers. The world languishes and withers. The heavens languish with the earth. The earth is defiled by its people. They have disobeyed the laws, violated the statutes, and broken the everlasting covenant. Therefore, a curse consumes the earth. Its people must bear their guilt. Therefore, earth's inhabitants are burned up, and very few are left. A new wine dries up, and the vine withers. All the merrymakers groan. The joyful timbrels are stilled. The noise of the revelers has stopped. The joyful harp is silent. No longer do they drink wine with a song. The beer is bitter to its drinkers. The ruined city lies desolate. The entrance to every house is barred. In the streets they cry out for wine. All joy turns to gloom. All joyful sounds are banished from the earth. The city is left in ruins. Its gate is battered to pieces. So will it be on the earth and among the nations. As when an olive tree is beaten, or as when gleanings are left after the grape harvest. They raise their voices, they shout for joy, From the west they acclaim the Lord's majesty. Therefore, in the east, give glory to the Lord. Exalt the name of the Lord, the God of Israel, in the islands of the sea. From the ends of the earth we hear singing, glory to the righteous one. But I said, I waste away, I waste away. Woe to me! The treacherous betray. With treachery, the treacherous betray. Terror and pit and snare await you, people of the earth. Whoever flees at the sound of terror will fall into a pit. Whoever climbs out of the pit will be caught in a snare. The floodgates of the heavens are opened. The foundations of the earth shake. The earth is broken up. The earth is split asunder. The earth is violently shaken. The earth reels like a drunkard. It sways like a hut in the wind. So heavy upon it is the guilt of its rebellion that it falls, never to rise again. In that day the Lord will punish the powers in the heavens above and the kings on the earth below. They will be herded together like prisoners bound in a dungeon. They will be shut up in prison and be punished after many days. The moon will be dismayed, the sun ashamed. For the Lord Almighty will reign on Mount Zion as in Jerusalem, and before its elders with great glory.
Chapter 25. O Lord, you are my God. I will exalt you. I will praise your name, for you have done wonderful things, plans formed of old, faithful and sure. For you have made the city a heath, the fortified city a ruin. The foreigner's palace is a city no more. It will never be rebuilt. Therefore, strong peoples will glorify you. Cities of ruthless nations will fear you. For you, lost my place just a minute. For you have been a stronghold to the poor, a stronghold to the needy in his distress, a shelter from the storm and a shade from the heat. For the breath of the ruthless is like a storm against a wall, like heat in a dry place. You subdue the noise of the foreigners as heat by the shade of a cloud. So the song of the ruthless is put down. On this mountain, the Lord of hosts will make for all peoples a feast of rich food, a feast of well-aged wine, of rich food full of marrow, of aged wine well refined. And he will swallow up on this mountain the covering that is cast over all peoples, the veil that is spread over all nations. He will swallow up death forever. And the Lord God will wipe away tears from all faces. And the reproach of his people he will take away from all the earth. For the Lord has spoken. It will be said on that day, behold, this is our God. We have waited for him that he might save us. This is the Lord. We have waited for him. Let us be glad and rejoice in his salvation. For the hand of the Lord will rest on this mountain, and Moab shall be trampled down in its place, as straw is trampled down in a dunghill. And he will spread out his hands in the midst of it, as a swimmer spreads his hands out to swim. But the Lord will lay low his pompous pride, together with the skill of his hands. And the high fortifications of his walls he will bring down, lay low, and cast to the ground, to the dust.
Isaiah 26, a song of praise. In that day, this song will be sung in the land of Judah. We have a strong city. God makes salvation its walls and ramparts. Open the gates that the righteous nation may enter, the nation that keeps faith. You will keep in perfect peace those whose minds are steadfast, trust because they trust in you. Trust in the Lord forever, for the Lord himself is the rock eternal. He humbles those who dwell on high. He lays the lofty city low. He levels it to the ground and casts it down to the dust. Feet trample it down, the feet of the oppressed, the footsteps of the poor. The path of the righteous is level. You, the upright one, make the way of the righteous smooth. Yes, Lord, walking in the way of your laws, we wait for you. Your name is renowned, or the desire of our hearts. My soul yearns for you in the night. In the morning, my spirit longs for you. When your judgments come upon the earth, the people of the world learn righteousness. But when grace is shown to be wicked, they do not learn righteousness. Even in a land of righteousness, they go on doing evil and do not regard the majesty of the Lord. Lord, your hand is lifted high, but they do not see it. Let them see your zeal for your people and be put to shame. Let the fire reserved for your enemies consume them. Lord, you establish peace for us. All that you've accomplished, you have done for us. Lord our God, other lords beside you have ruled over us, but your name alone do we honor. They are now dead. They live no more. Their spirits do not rise. You punished them and brought them to ruin. You wiped out all memory of them. You have enlarged the nation, Lord. You have enlarged the nation. You have gained glory for yourself. You have extended all the borders of the land. Lord, they come to you in their distress when you discipline them. They could barely whisper a prayer. As a pregnant woman about to give birth writhes and cries out in her pain, so were we in your presence, Lord. We were with child, we writhed in labor, but we gave birth to win. We have not brought salvation to the earth, and the people of the world have not come to life. But your dead will live, Lord. Their bodies will rise. Let those who dwell in the dust wake up and shout for joy. Your dew is like the dew of the morning. The earth will give birth to her dead. Go, my people, into your rooms and shut the doors behind you. Hide yourselves for a little while until his wrath has passed by. See, the Lord is coming out of his dwelling to punish the people of the earth for their sins. The earth will disclose the blood shed on it. The earth will conceal its slain no longer.
Chapter 27. In that day, the Lord will punish with his sword, his fierce, great, and powerful sword. Leviathan, the gliding serpent. Leviathan, the coiling serpent. He will slay the monster of the sea. In that day, sing about a fruitful vineyard. I, the Lord, watch over it. I water it continually. I guard it day and night so that no one may harm it. I am not angry. If only there were briars and thorns confronting me, I would march against them in battle. I would set them on fire, or else let them come to me for refuge. Let them make peace with me. Yes, let them make peace with me. In the days to come, Jacob will not take root. Israel will bud and blossom and fill all the world with fruit. The Lord has struck her as he struck down those who struck her. I'm sorry. Has the Lord struck her as he has struck down those who struck her? Has she been killed as those killed? Has she been killed as those were killed who killed her? By warfare and exile you contend with her. With his fierce blast he drives her out, as on a day the east wind blows. By this then will Jacob's guilt be atoned for, and this will be the full fruit of the removal of his sin, when he makes all the altar stones to be like limestone crushed to pieces. No Asherah poles or incense altars will be left standing. The fortified city stands desolate, an abandoned settlement, forsaken like the wilderness. There the calves graze, and there they lie down. They strip its branches bare. When its twigs are dry, they are broken off. And the women come and make fires with them, for this is a people without understanding. So their Maker has no compassion on them, and their Creator shows them no favor. In that day, the Lord will thresh from the flowing Euphrates to the Wadi of Egypt, and you, Israel, will be gathered up one by one. And in that day, a great trumpet will sound. Those who were punishing in Assyria and those who were exiled in Egypt will come and worship the Lord on the holy mountain in Jerusalem.
Amen. Thank you, all the readers. So, as I said in an email a week or so back, I said about this section, about Isaiah in general, that he has a kind of a recursive style. He covers some ground, and then he goes back and talks about something he's already talked about again, and then goes forward and then back. It's kind of recursive. It's always each individual part, I think, advances a little bit, but it always seems to go back and start somewhere. And that makes reading the chapters really hard if you can't figure out, like you'll be reading something about judgment, and then all of a sudden it's great praise for the Lord, and then it's back to something else, and you go, "What just happened? Did the subject just changed?"
Wait, what?
And yeah, what? And I think that probably happens. I didn't count them, but it seems like a dozen or so times in these 4 chapters where that type of thing happens. It was actually so difficult for me to figure out what was going on. I actually made an Excel spreadsheet and line by line said, okay, this is what's happening in this line. This is what's happening in this line. And I included that completed spreadsheet as part of the handout that I posted so that you can see it. But one of the things that is interesting in this section, it starts out about the desolation of the earth. The Lord in chapter 24 starts out, he's pronouncing judgment. He's going to come, roused from his place. He is going to make the earth completely desolate. But then you find out in verse 6 of chapter 1 that there's going to be people who are not destroyed. And so it's not picturing final judgment, even though a lot of interpreters think that. They'll read it and go, oh, this is about the end of the world. But it's actually not. There's going to be a remnant that does not get destroyed in this judgment. And in fact, what happens because of this judgment on the earth is that God's people are going to be returning to the land. That's how this ends in chapter 27. They're coming out of Assyria, they're coming out of Egypt, and they're being regathered into the land. And so I would just start off by saying that it's worth considering that these chapters are about speaking in cosmic language about the judgment on the nations to which the Israelites have been scattered, so that God then fulfills his promises by returning them to the land. And it's using cosmic language to do that. You might have also noticed that there is this interplay between city and earth. Starts off going to judge the earth, the world, but then throughout there's this back and forth between talking about the city, which is unnamed, and the world. And the city, there might be more than one city, because one city is destroyed and one city is a stronghold for God's people, but it's all talked about under the image of a city. And so that's something you might have noticed. So I guess probably this would be a good point to ask you guys if you had noticed anything else that stood out to you in these chapters. And then after we do that, I'll go through some of the things in the overview and the outline. So does anybody have anything after reading the chapters right now that kind of stood out to you on this read through?
Well, you kind of you kind of brought it up yourself. For example, in chapter 24, the transition from verse 13 to verse 14 is striking. It gives you pause. Is there something between 13 and 14 that I missed?
Yeah. Yeah. I had that experience lots of times, right? Reading through it, it's like, what, what? You just stopped a subject that seemed to want to continue and picked up something else, right? And there's a lot of that that goes on. So I think in a lot of cases, not only is, one explanation is that he's going back to something he's already brought up and he's talking about again. Another explanation is he's talking about different time periods. Like he's talking about right now, you guys are right, the Lord is coming in judgment, but his plan is that his people would praise him. So now this, later that type of thing. Um, okay. Well, let me share with you some of the things that I thought about. So we're just getting out of the section, the oracles against the nations, and there's this quotation, short quotation, from one of the commentaries I was reading. It was actually the Spirit of the Reformation Study Bible. It says these chapters, the chapters we're reading now, these chapters summarize and combine the descriptions of the preceding chapters, which were the oracles of the nations. So they summarize and combine the descriptions in the preceding chapters into a grand portrait of cosmic significance. And I think that's noticeable. I think that's demonstrably true that what's happening is things that the Lord has said in the earlier section about the oracles against the nations, that he's now repeating those things, but giving them a cosmic flavor to it, and saying, not only am I going to judge Tyre and Babylon and Assyria and Egypt, I'm going to judge the whole world. And, he's just described the whole world in the oracles against the nations, and now it's being summarized again in this section here. As I mentioned, the prophecy moves back and forth talking about a city or the city and the whole world. And if we look at Isaiah 24:10-13, which I have in the outline there, you can see that the city, or what happens uh, in the city, God's judgment upon the city, is a pattern for his judgment on the whole world. So it says, the wasted city is broken down. Every house is shut up so that none can enter. There's an outcry in the streets for lack of wine. All joy has grown dark. The gladness of the earth is banished. Desolation is left in the city. The gates are battered into ruins. For thus it shall be in the midst of the earth among the nations, as when an olive tree is beaten, as at the gleaning when the grape harvest is done. So there's a equating of this judgment on the city with the judgment on the whole earth and of all the nations. And again, we have here at the end of verse 13 that image about the harvest and the beating the olive tree. The gleanings are left. This indicates a remnant, so it's not the final judgment. But this indicates that not everybody is destroyed in the judgment. That's why there's gleanings left. So in the book of Isaiah so far, I've noticed, if I could use this language, I've noticed three main actors, three main characters, three main subjects. They are God's people, who I'm going to call Israel just for the sake of simplicity. God's people, Israel. When I say that, I don't mean the kingdom of Israel, but the united people of God, God's people, Israel. And then the third actor has been the nations. And the question has basically been, what this is the relationship between God, this is what the relationship looks like today. This is not right. This is what the relationship should be. So the first main character in the book of Isaiah, God, right? And he's revealed as the Holy One. He's the Almighty Sovereign over creation. He's chosen this people, Israel, for himself, to reflect his character and to be light in the world, and lights such that other people, the nations, would see the light of God's grace and truth and mercy, and come and adore the Lord too, submit themselves to him too. And we know that that's God's plan. We know that from Deuteronomy. And by the time we get to Isaiah, we've had hundreds of years of Israel not being a light. And it continues in Exodus. The chosen people continually fail to be lights in the darkness and to draw the nations to them. Instead, they bow down to the nations and fear them and seek them, and they are not lights and they are not leading people to the Lord. And so they need to be chastened by the Lord. And that's what all of the problems and judgments that God has brought upon them is to chasten them, and including the exile, which is the final chastening before restoration. So God shows himself to be holy, almighty, sovereign, and also merciful and compassionate and steadfast to his promises. And so this is what we see about the Lord. And then Israel, as I've said, instead of trusting the Lord, who chose them, God's people have a relationship with the nations. And either that relationship is they're seeking to trust the nations, or they're in fear of the nations. So it's, they're hoping to gain something by trusting the nations. They're hoping to avoid something by fearing them. And generally, when they fear one nation, they tend to trust another one. So when the people trust God's nations, God shows that to be foolish, shows them to be foolish, because God shows himself to be sovereign over all the nations, not just the people of Israel. And he shows that by sometimes judging those nations, or by sometimes using those nations to punish his own people, to judge his own people. And the point is also made multiple times that when God makes this point, when the nations are trusted by God's people instead of God's people trusting him, what happens often is that the nations eventually turn against God's people, even though God's people had trusted them and relied on them. And so this, on the surface of it, then the relationship of trusting the nations for salvation is shown to be a bad idea because it leads to bad consequences. So the people also fear the nations. They're a small nation, Israel is, and the other nations seem more powerful and more threatening. And so they seek to make bargains with them, or they seek to find another more powerful nation to defend them. And all the time they're being told to trust in the Lord. Alliances are not bad per se, but alliances made in unbelief are bad. And it could be that the Lord wants them to just trust him and not form an alliance with any other nation, or it could be he wants an alliance of faith, but they never do the right thing, or rarely do the right thing. I found it interesting that when I was thinking about the relationship of Israel and the nations, this fear of the nations and this hope in the nations, that these are exactly the same two things that we see that the devil uses against God's people, particularly when you read through the letters in Revelation 2 and 3. They're continually being, the devil challenges them with fear of loss. You're going to lose this thing, so you have to trust in, something other than God, or hope of gain. If you do this, you'll get this good thing, right? And that's just the way the devil always does stuff. It's nothing new in any of that. So the nations, the third character, the question is, Israel's failed. Will the nations be drawn to the Lord or not? That's Israel has failed in her, so far at least in the story. Israel's failed to trust the Lord and be lights to the nations, and they're all unbelieving and dominating basically Israel. So will the nations come to the Lord? And the answer is yes. Will Israel fulfill its role in being a light to the world and in drawing all the nations to the Lord? No, and yes. All right. Israel is unbelieving, rebellious Israel never changes. Uh, the Lord has to call out a remnant of Israel, whom he will give true faith. But the actual fulfillment of the light to the world is done by the Messiah. He is the one servant of the Lord who Isaiah will focus on later on in later chapters in Isaiah. And this servant of the Lord, who is himself the Lord, and he is the new Israel, he will fully obey and fully trust the Father, and will, by his work, he will draw all people to himself. And that's, we all familiar with that passage in John where Jesus says, and when I am lifted up, I will draw all people to myself. He's the fulfillment of Israel's purpose. He is the one who will accomplish that. And then the Lord has disclosed, primarily through Paul, at least most clearly, that the Lord will then use the nations to provoke Israel to jealousy. He'll do that by saving the nations and pouring out the blessings promised to Abraham on the Gentiles. And that will provoke Israel to come to their Messiah and be saved. And so this is the subject of the rest of Isaiah. So as I said, the key question is, what's the relationship between God, Israel, and the nations? That's been the subject of the book of Isaiah so far. The question stated another way, from God to his people, is, who will you trust? The Lord's been asking them, won't you trust me and not the nations? And that, I think we can all pretty much see that that's been what's been going on in Isaiah so far. In the first part of Isaiah, the first half of the book, or chapters 1 to 39, usually is described as the first major section. So in that major section, we're just over 2/3 of the way through. And so far, what's happened is Isaiah 1 through 5 has been about God's rebellious and unfaithful people. That's where it starts. You might want to think about actually the whole trajectory of Isaiah. So Isaiah 65 and 66, I don't have this on the outline, but Isaiah 65 and 66 is the new heavens and new earth. So it starts with God's rebellious people who are going to be judged by God. And it ends with God's redeemed people in the new heavens and new earth. So there's this really great trajectory there. Similar to what we have in chapters 24 through 27. Starts off with judgment, ends with God's people being restored to him. And so similar type of thing. So Isaiah 1 through 5, God's rebellious and unfaithful people. Isaiah 6, Isaiah himself is called to be a prophet. He encounters God, the Holy One. And Isaiah's he's called there, and then he's cleansed, and he's given this job to do. And that pattern is exactly what God is laying out, what must happen with his people. They must be cleansed before they can do the thing he's called them to do. They've been called, must be cleansed, and then sent out to do the work. Isaiah 7 through 12, we had Ahaz and the Syrio-Ephraimite coalition that was arranged against him, and Ahaz failed to trust the Lord. He says, I'm going to trust Assyria. So then Isaiah 13 to 23, those are the oracles against the nations. The main point of that is it's foolishness to trust the nations. They're all used by God, and they're all under his judgment. It's foolishness to trust them. Section we're in is about God as king of all the nations. And after this section, there's another grouping of chapters 28 to 33. And this is about the Assyrian threat, the present threat of Assyria, and the call to trust the Lord. And then Isaiah 34 and 35, the choice is that you can be faithless, and this will end up in a desolation or a desert. or you can be faithful, and that ends in fruitfulness and rest in a garden. It's a picture that's being painted there in Isaiah 34, 35. And then finally in Isaiah 36 to 39, you have the invasion or the siege of Jerusalem by Sennacherib. And this is about Hezekiah, the king at that time, his trust in God, and then his failure to trust God, which will bring the Babylonian exile. So those are kind of the main sections of Isaiah. So we are right in the section right in the middle of those, which is God is sovereign. God is sovereign. And we see movement from totally rebellious and unfaithful people to Hezekiah actually trusts God at the end of this major thing. He actually trusts him, although he fails as well. Main themes tend to occur in pairs. And so there are 5 that I identified. There might be more. I got 5. So there's failure to trust the Lord, or you can be obedient to him. That's a main theme. The nations are presented as idols or as converted. God is highlighted his holiness, his justice. So this would be judgment motif, right? Judgment passages highlights the holiness of God and his justice. Or God is being highlighted as merciful in the passages about salvation. There is either judgment of sin and rebellion or deliverance from sin and rebellion. So one thing and its opposite. And then there is this theme of the destruction of the wicked, or the wicked city, or the wicked nations, or the creation of the new heavens and the new earth. So these kind of paired themes have been showing up a lot, and I think they're going to characterize the entire book of Isaiah. If you have the outline, there's a graphic, a little box that I've drawn there. So for those of you who don't have the outline, I basically have a rectangle with a line diagonally going from the top left corner to the bottom right, or close to that. It seems to have moved on the one that I'm looking at right now. This represents the percentage. So what you have then is 2 triangles. The one on the left, the thicker, the tallest side of the triangle is on the left side, and then it goes down to a point toward the right. And the other one starts in the upper right corner and then gets or upper left corner, sorry, and gets larger to the right. You can visualize that. And I've got these themes. So on one side, in the leftermost side, Israel's failure to trust the Lord, the nations as idols, the holiness of God, or judgment of sin and rebellion, destruction of the sinful city. These are focused on a whole lot more in chapters 1 through 39 than they are in the rest of the book. They're not exclusively the only things focused on in chapter 1 to 39, but they are, I would say, the main focus of these chapters, of this main section, the first half of Isaiah's book. The second section, chapters 40 through 66, tend to focus on the other side of the pair. So the servants, or new Israel's complete obedience to the Lord instead of Israel's failure to trust the Lord. The servants' success and obedience is focused on. Instead of the nations as idols, the end of the book focuses on the nations as converted. Instead of the just judgment and holiness and justice of God, the mercy of God is really highlighted in the second part of the book. Instead of judgment, deliverance is highlighted in the second half. And instead of destruction of the sinful city or the sinful nations, the creation of the new heavens and the new earth is highlighted mostly in the second part of the book. The point of mentioning this right now, and I'm sure you've all noticed this, is that all of these themes do appear in the first part of the book. Even in the section we just read, we have new heavens and new earth, the nations converted. We have obedience to the Lord. We have deliverance from sin. We have all those things, right? Plus all the other ones that are about failure and disobedience and judgment and destruction. We have those themes too. But in the earlier part of the book, 1 through 39, it's the negative things that dominate. But some of these positive things are kind of sprinkled in. But they get more and more, the positive things get more and more frequent as we move through the book, and the negative ones get less and less frequent. So that's what this diagram, this rectangle is supposed to show. Yeah. So I have a summary of what I think the book of Isaiah is about. If you printed the outline before last night, then this summary is not on there. So I'll just read it to you. The book of Isaiah presents a profound transition from Israel's failure to trust the Lord, the nations serving as idols, and the subsequent judgment of God's holiness leading to the destruction of the sinful city. This negative emphasis ultimately gives way to the complete obedience and humble trust of the servant, who is the new Israel, resulting in the conversion of the nations, the manifestation of God's mercy, deliverance from sin and rebellion, and the glorious creation of the new heavens and the new earth. So that's kind of an overview of what's going on in Isaiah and who the three main actors are, and it's about what is the right relationship between them, and how it was all messed up because of sin, and how God's going to fix it. Any questions or comments about any of that? That was a lot of stuff. Any comments about? If you have it in front of you and you're reading it, it's a whole lot easier, I think, to follow.
Well, I could say something.
Yeah, please do.
Concerning what we read, 24 to 27, and I'm thinking this may be a dispensationalist view, what I'm about to share that I've heard, is that you could correct me if I'm wrong, that the Isaiah's prophecies here, I remember it was called the little apocalypse because it looks beyond the judgment of Israel to the final judgment of the tribulation period and the coming of the Messianic kingdom. Now, is that dispensationalist view? Is that the truth or what? I'm thinking it's a dispensationalist view, but I don't know.
Well, it would align with the dispensationalist view. It could be other people that also hold that view. But yeah, I think you're right. It's probably a dispensationalist teacher that you heard that from. It's not apocalyptic because it looks beyond Israel's time. It's apocalyptic because apocalyptic literature, it's a form of literature, uses cosmic or universal language, but it doesn't necessarily describe universal judgment or universal. Like it says, this is going to happen to the whole world, but it doesn't necessarily mean the whole world. There could be the world is being used as a referent or a word, a stand-in word for another subject, which is less than the whole world, something like that. So, and this, as we saw, it goes back and forth between city and world, and there are going to be survivors. So it's not the final judgment on anybody's eschatology. The final judgment leaves no survivors. There are. It doesn't matter. So for someone to say this is, about the final judgment or something like that, is to ignore the several passages that talk about people being surviving this, not being destroyed. And then the result of that, of course, is in the passage itself, is that the nations do something. And so if they were all destroyed, they wouldn't be there to do something. So it's
right.
So what we then have is a kind of a picturesque language to describe something that is, on the first blush, you read it through and you think it's final judgment, but then you start reading through again and you notice that it can't be. And so, so you want to put it in the proper perspective. So yeah. Thank you for bringing that up. I do think that probably was a dispensational.
Well, I also have one other question.
Yeah.
And that is concerning verse 23 in chapter 24, 23, where it talks about the moon being confounded and the sun is shamed. Does that in any way coincide with Matthew 24, where it talks about the sun being darkened and the moon not giving her light and the stars falling from heaven, that kind of thing? Do they coincide, or are they just totally different, or what?
That's a really good question. So I recently watched a lecture on these passages by a guy named Steve Gregg, and Steve Gregg is somebody I respect as a teacher. He wrote a really good commentary on Matthew 24 and about the book of Revelation. And he would say, Shirley, you're absolutely right. That's that's the same thing. He wouldn't just say they're similar. He would say what's being talked about in Isaiah 24 is what Jesus is talking about in Matthew 24. And then he would further say that's about the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD. And he has an argument for that, and I thought his argument was pretty good, but I can't follow him. I think he had to kind of fit things into his model that shouldn't be forced that way. But his model basically is that what Isaiah is delivering here in these 4 chapters is a picture of the destruction of Jerusalem in AD 70. And therefore, this passage about the sun and the moon would line up perfectly with what Jesus says in Matthew 24. It would be the same thing. My understanding is that this has similarities in language, not just this verse, but throughout this has similarities of language with other judgment passages, of which Matthew 24 is a judgment passage. The book of Revelation contains lots of judgment passages. This is similar to a judgment passage because it is a judgment passage, right? And so it's going to have similarities with other judgment passages. And that this is more of a reference in verse 23 here. There's 2 things probably being referenced. The first one is the sun and the moon, and this is a reference back to Genesis. The sun and the moon are created as lights to govern, but their light is so pitifully insignificant compared to the light of the Lord that they are embarrassed to even show up here. The Lord now is on. I mean, that's the picture, right? And the other thing is that may be in view here is that the sun and the moon are being portrayed as embarrassed to show themselves in the Lord's presence because they have been the object of worship by God's sinful people. They worship the heavenly bodies. And now the heavenly bodies are in the Lord's presence and they're like, I don't feel good about that. So, so I think that's what's going on there. There could be some other connection with Matthew 24. And Matthew 24, though, when he's talking about sun, moon, the sun, moon, and stars will fall from the sky and all of that, it is typical judgment language. And secondly, I think he is referring to Genesis, but in a different way. I think in the exact same passage that's being referred to in the Isaiah passage, Genesis chapter 1, 14, I think it is. Jesus is saying, so the stars, the sun, moon, and stars, they were all in Genesis chapter 1. They are leaders. I mean, they stand for leaders later on in the Bible because God set them in the sky as rulers over, that's the word he uses, rulers over the seasons and whatnot. And then the Bible uses sun, moon, and stars as leaders of either tribes, like Joseph's father is the sun, his mother is the moon, his brothers are stars, Genesis 39, or as pictures for like the leaders over Israel. They're sometimes called stars or sun or moon. And so when the sun and the moon and the stars are going to fall in Matthew 24, it's a pronouncement against Israel's leadership, that kind of thing. It doesn't say that
No.
it's impossible for the sun and the moon and the stars to also fall, but I think he's using it as a representation of the judgment on the people and their leaders there.
Mm.
Yeah. So I do have one more thing I want to say. I see it's 10:30, but I hope you can all stay for this last thing I want to say, and I'll start with it again next week. But one of the things that you want to notice is that this passage, this Isaiah 24 to 27 that we read, it presupposes, if you're looking at its setting, when is this set? Is this the final judgment? It actually presupposes the exile and the return from it. It isn't presupposing final judgment after the Messianic age. I mean, the Messianic age is a really big thing, which is not really talked about as something that happens and then this judgment. But what is talked about is the exile. And in that section that Becky read in chapter 27, verses 7 and 8, he says, the Lord, or Isaiah says, has God struck you or them? Has God struck them, Israel, as he struck those who struck them? So he's asking Israel, God is asking Israel, yeah, I struck you, but did I do it in the same way I struck the nations? Have you been slain the way I slayed the nations? In other words, I judged you, I judged the nations. Are they identical judgments? And the answer is no. The answer is no, because the Lord chastises his people so that they may come to him, but he judges the nations to their own destruction. And verse 8, measure by exile, you contended with them. He removed them with his fierce breath in the day of the east wind. So, exile, and then at the end of chapter 27, people are coming back from Assyria and Egypt, places where they've been scattered in the exile. The whole 4 chapters presupposes that the problem that's being solved is the exile, and not the so it's not the final judgment, even though it has similarities in language and description with the final judgment, just because that's the way God teaches us, right? He uses the same examples to teach us about things. They're all related to the final judgment, but this is not the final judgment. So, but you can, I'm sure that, don't take my word for it. If you're not convinced, read through the 4 chapters again and see. So, anyway, so I'll pick up with some other comments in introduction next week, and then we'll start working through line verse by verse. Take a look at in the outline, if you can, that on page 6, I start with an outline of Isaiah 24 to 27, thought by thought. That's, you can look at the various passages and see what's going on, but it's helpful to look through that and kind of see how he's returning back to the same subjects, and the subjects would be in the description, the second column there. All right. Anybody have anything else you want to add before we close today?